It's time that you knew there's someone there who's searching for you, and it's time that you believe he's gonna find you.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Two Guys Fixing the World. My name is Mark Davis Sallard, and with me is my good friend Ryan Jans. How you doing, Ryan?
All things considered, I'm doing pretty good, Mark. How are you doing today?
Not too bad. We're going to continue a conversation about the current issues or the current events. I say the big event that's affecting us all. But maybe you should tell us what we're fixing today.
Well, the subject of our we're going to get the tools out and try and fix we are going to fix the viral economic crash. That's what we're fixing today. So
Indeed.
nice, easy, light topic for a Thursday.
Indeed. So, just going to turn you up there a little quiet there. Okay.
I might be a little bit under from the mic. Hang on. Here we go.
I can take a bit. Okay. So the current economic collapse. It's Trump blames it on the Chinese virus. Laugh though that is. Well, actually, I think before we get into it, I just wanted to say that it's funny that this virus Trump is calling the Chinese virus. And do you know where the Spanish virus originally came from?
No, where did it come
Kansas. Kansas. That's where it came from. I found that out this week, so that was kind of right. And it was, I guess, really
right
good.
on.
Spain was hit the worst. I guess that's why it was called that. Anyhow, a little bit of extra info there. So what's really as I was researching for this, it kind of remembered and or reiterated, I say, it was some prophecies I've been hearing for some secular prophets. When I say that, I mean, of course, some financial experts, some economists. One of them is Mark Blythe, and he actually is famous for, after 2008, writing. Was it before, even around that time? Austerity, the history of a dangerous idea, and Robert D. Wolfe, who is an economist, Democracy at Work, and I forget the other site he's on. Anyway, it'll come to me in a bit. And they have both been saying we are not just heading towards, or we have been heading towards, an economic crisis, because usually capitalism, we go through these economic cycles where every 4 to 8 years, something along those lines, we go through a recession. And it's and Richard Wolff for sure has been saying it's going to be a doozy because it's over 10 years and we're well beyond, well, no, 12 years. And so it's inevitable. This was going to happen. And I think that's the first major point. But the pandemic, we want to blame it. I want to clear this up right away, as we're going to get into this a little bit deeper, is that the pandemic did not cause, in and of itself, the economic downturn that we're experiencing now. It was, in fact, just the detonator for something that was destined to happen.
It didn't cause it, but it certainly opened the door for it. That's an easier way to.
Well, actually, it was more of a. We could actually look at it as the pin that popped the bubble, which we'll get to shortly.
Oh, yeah, fair enough. Good.
Like that. So there's actually a quote. MR Online, an article there. There'll be lots of information in the show notes on YouTube and on our website as well. Once I've posted this up, I'll put all the notes up tomorrow. I'm just going to quote you from this article. Serious events of a different nature could have constituted that spark or trigger, such as the outbreak of a war between Washington and Iran, or direct US military intervention in Venezuela. The ensuing stock market crisis could have been attributed to the war and its consequences. So it could have been anything of significance that could have made this happen. So what are your thoughts on that, Brian?
You see, we were chit-chatting before, and I remember looking through this, and I'm almost wondering if a war between Iran and or U.S. military intervention in Venezuela might have been easier to endure than this, mostly because if they decide to go to war, that's a very specific. There's planes. They got to build planes. They got to build tanks. They got to build guns. They got to build ammunition. It's a build, 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 right? And so you could almost say that, yeah, okay, they're at least gonna try and produce something by going to war. No, I'm not saying that we should go to war just to produce things and make the economy better.
Mm-hmm.
That's a terrible idea. But I'm wondering if it might have been easier to sort of endure this, because at least that there would have been something there. This just pulled the rug out of everything. This is like the worst possible thing. This is even worse than
I think
Iran launching missiles.
Well, right? I mean, this is kind of difficult to hide from, right? I mean, you can always blame something that's only happening in another country.
Mm-hmm.
So some of your points I can probably address. Certainly, they wouldn't necessarily have to produce anything to having a war or an invasion of either of those two countries, because the US already has a massive US military economy, right? It's already massive.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't have been so personal, for sure. The stock market would have still crashed. Would that have affected us here in Canada as much? Probably not.
But would it have crashed as much? That's the question. They go to war, things drop, but here the problem is that it's affected every industry, whether you're manufacturing in the financial sector, whether you're a builder or in construction. It doesn't matter what industry you're in, you're touched. And not only that, because it's hurt manufacturing, and there's a huge amount of consumable goods like masks and ventilators and respirators and antiseptic hand gel and all the things that you need to stay safe are now supply low, demand heavy. And I have a feeling that if we had or if the US had just gone to war with Iran, well, maybe they would be hurt. We might see a small bounce in our dollar, but because this hit everybody in every market, every sector, we're all really badly hurting. And that's really hard to say what would have what's worse. And I think this is the worst of the two.
Yeah, you're
probably right. I want the US to go to war.
Yeah, well, the difference, because the big difference is that it affects us. This affects us personally. It affects us now, and it's going to affect us for a long time. And we're all shut-ins for the most parts. Get in your car, go through a drive-through, and then come back home again. That's kind of all you're really.
that's the exciting part of your day, right? Yeah. What did you do today? Well, I went to McDonald's instead of Tim Hortons. I got a blueberry muffin instead of a donut, and I got a sweetener instead of sugar in my coffee. Yeah. Those are my options for being social.
Yeah. And I had a nice Brazilian coffee from Tim Hortons, because it's a Brazilian-owned company. Anyhow, I do that every time, I think. So there we are. Yeah. So definitely, we would not have been shut in. We would not. Maybe we would have a toilet paper issue. I don't know. Maybe it would be something else. But we definitely would be experienced. There definitely would be problems, financial problems, particularly stock market crashes and all that.
Yeah.
But to what degree?
I just don't think it would have been so devastating and so wide. I think we would have seen a slower decline. And I think that's maybe more allegorical, because I remember when September 11th happened, and then they went to war, and they decided to go to war against a noun, which never works, because nouns are stubborn things, and you never win when you go to war against a noun. Like, so the war on drugs, the war on terror, the war on et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
You maybe thought that this was going to be like World War II, when, okay, they're going to go to war, it's going to get the economy going. The truth is that the only reason the U.S. came out ahead in World War II is they were like the last to join, and they basically cleaned up when everybody else was weakened, and they still had money, and everybody needed money to keep making all the things they need to make to do war. So when the U.S. was the only person or the only nation that really, really wanted to go, was like ready to go to war after 9/11, the rest of the world was like, okay, don't put the guns at us.
Yeah.
So, and then you saw everything sort of declined for a little while, and then it really declined when we hit 2008 because of a different issue. But it
Well, we're going to get to
wars
that.
don't
There's
make
actually
economy.
there are a lot of similarities there. Which we'll get to in a couple. In the point after the next one. And it will have to do with. Well, I'll spoil it. Bubbles, but we'll get to the bubbles in a sec. So one of the other contributing
Bubble.
factors.
Oh, you can't really see it. It's bubbly.
Oh, okay. Sorry, yeah. So one of the
Sorry,
other
bad joke.
one of the other contributing factors to the economic collapse that we're experiencing now is that we can't really blame the virus for this economic collapse. It's definitely a factor, and it is definitely making it a little bit worse, probably making it a lot worse actually. But since the second half of 2019, long before we knew anything about COVID-19, and so in the second half of 2019, a recession began in the manufacturing sectors in Germany, Italy, Japan, South Africa, Argentina, and several other places, including the United States. So this has actually been going on, and there's particularly in Germany, they actually stopped making cars. I think South Korea as well. I think actually they just recently stopped making cars completely, shutting down. But there's just too much. They can't just keep making them because there's already a backlog of pretty much everything. And that's the issue with the system that we're in, is it's really efficient at producing things, but the problem is that the people that are buying it, the working people, don't have any money to buy the stuff that's produced because we're the ones that are buying it. And so that's certainly exasperating it now.
Exactly. Like and there's this whole thing about wanting to overinflate the value, and we'll get more into that as we talk more, but you overinflate the value of your product that you're producing. And some of it is inevitable, like if you have to pay workers and you become a very specialized person, you obviously get paid more money because you're a specialist. And that just drives the price up because now you have to pay $4 instead of $3 to have someone who's a generalist to do what the specialist is doing. But the specialist does it better, so you pay them the extra dollar more, but that means it's more on your cost, so it means you have to upgrade more. This is just basics in how it goes. But if you have a bunch of people who are being paid, and if you've got a lot of money and you decide, oh, I'm going to pay everybody a lot of money because everybody else seems to be buying the price of my product at what I'd like to get, the more money you put out towards things like pensions, that eats into your margin, right? Pensions and all the stuff that you need that we really need as workers, and even just as arguably as human beings, things like pensions and things like access to healthcare and all the things that we need that make just life great in our neck of the woods. But that all has to get factored into what you're selling. Right? So that's the problem is right there. So now you have to overinflate that so that the guy at the top makes his money as well, right? He has to sell. We've now produced it. We've been paid for it. We don't care. But now he could have 100 of these items sitting in a warehouse somewhere that he has to sell. And so he can either sell at a loss, which he won't, or he can sell at a margin that he makes money.
Right, and we got I mean, the system is kind of set up that way, right? It's you get, let's say, you get 10, 15 people were working on a production line. Every hour they produce a car. I don't know how cars are made, to be honest with you. But let's say once an hour.
Oh, robots now.
Yeah, well, yeah. So you got 15 people working on this production line, and once an hour a car runs out, goes into the lot, ready to be sold. That's one car for 8 hours of work. One car every hour for 8 hours. That's 8 cars. You've only got 15 people. You do that for a week. You got 40 cars, but you've only got 50 people working. So who's going to be buying these cars? I mean, the same thing's going to happen in every other company as well. Everyone is producing more than they could possibly buy, and the purchaser is the person doing the work on the bottom rung. That's the people that almost always buy the things. Big Lamborghinis aside, of course, but.
Well, I mean, we're not talking about specialty cars. We're talking about the entry level cars, like Why can't I think of I used to drive one, a Toyota Yaris. That's like that's like their bottom of the line, right? And you can get it with all the options and everything, but it's like their bottom of the line one, and they have like a new one every year. And in fact, they even change the model every 5 years. And then they produce less of the higher quality cars, right? The higher you go up because they cost more.
Yeah,
But
right.
I mean,
Well,
but really, when you think about it, do we need to really be producing things like cars every year? Do we have to have a 2019 model and a 2020 and then a 2021?
yes, because of the bottom line. You got to. Well, actually, we might get to that a little further down. I'll skim down my notes. The way the economy works, and I mean, actually, maybe that's a good time for me actually to spurt in with my. It's always puzzled me. I'm not an economist, but it's a silly and a fragile system that we have. Is where you can't just say, "Oh, you know what? We've got a problem. Let's close the doors for 2 weeks to 4 weeks, and then we'll just pick it up again, in 2 to 4 weeks." But to do that, then the economy stops moving, money stops moving around, and suddenly everything loses its value, and it really doesn't make an awful lot of sense. It seems an incredibly unstable system where, because if you plan for it, a lot of places, I don't know if they still do, but factories will shut down over Christmas for a few days or for a week, right?
Yeah, some of them will.
Yeah, but you can't do that during the year because, and that's kind of, it's always puzzled me why we can't have a system where you can't do that. But I think I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself because I think I'm going to dig into another point that I had. But let's talk about bubbles. So bubbles, we are suffering from the effect of burst bubbles, and we're going to talk about the specific bubbles in a sec. But just want a quote here from Jean-Marie Haribé, a French economist. Just a quote. It says, "Bubbles burst when the gap between realized value and promised value becomes too great, and some speculators understand that promises of profitable liquidation cannot be honored for all. In other words, when financial capital gain can never be realized for the lack of sufficient surplus value in production." So in other words, there's more money in the system than there is products to back it up. And if you haven't already looked into it, then I would strongly recommend you look into the tulip bubble. I think that's probably a good. Find out about that in the Renaissance, I think, 1700s. Can't remember when it was.
It'd be around the 15th century, somewhere in that neighborhood. Yeah. Now, before we get into more of the specifics, we have a couple of people who joined us here. Our co-host on the Invisible Man Show, our other show that we try and do weekly, Phil Dupuis has joined us.
Hey, Phil.
AKA
buddy.
Colorado Phil.
Yo,
Glad
Phil.
to have you with us. And a good friend of mine, Alana Penner, lives down the street from me. Oh. Stuck in self-isolation. They just came back from New York City as the pandemic was in full swing.
Excellent.
Hope you guys are doing well. Glad you could join us. I'm assuming that Luke, your husband, is watching with you. So hi to you folks there. So anyways, we'll get more into some of the specific bubbles here now.
Well, so the first one, and these are in no particular order, this is the order that I've written them down, was the stock market. Obviously is the big one that popped. And that's, when was that? Was that a week ago, week and a half ago? I should look at my notes. I don't know.
It's happened. It's not the first time the stock market has crashed.
No, but I mean just for this.
For this particular instance, it was like last week.
I did write it down, and I've got so many notes here. It's insane. March 9th. Black Monday. Yeah, okay, I think they're all called Black weeks. Something, right?
It was about 2 weeks.
It was the worst drop since the Great Recession of 2008. I've got some other notes too, but we'll look at those as we go. So, so the stock market, probably the biggest bubble. I know that some economists will argue, well, this is not a Ponzi scheme, but it kind of is to us laymen, where you buy a stock, and particularly publicly traded companies are, you get dividends, the stocks go up, you trade them, you make money on the stocks, and that's how you make your money. You don't make money on buying and trading goods. So it's very much a Ponzi scheme. You're making money on other people's investments. But that was going to fail, and it did, and they panicked, and everyone kind of left. And it was funny that was a $2 trillion injection by the US into the economy soon after that. So I think it was the Friday, following that. And it didn't pick up. It actually made it a little bit worse. And then I think that if I got my sequence of events in order, then we had other people helping out in Europe, and then the US added a bit more in, and then it recovered a little bit. But they are still at an all-time low. Now, the other big thing too is corporate borrowing has been a massive issue, where now they can buy or take on debt for literally no money, sometimes for negative interest rates, and it's often called free money. They're given free money.
Yeah,
that's one of the other
the
bubbles
miracle
as
of
well.
money from nowhere.
And then, of course, the real estate bubble, which is still a thing. It wasn't fixed in 2008. Still an issue.
And that was an interesting thing, because you think, why would a U.S. housing bubble that bursts cause Greece to go bankrupt? And it talks about the way that our globalized system and how fragile it is, and and how subject to manipulation it is, and just how awful, and how much the people who are sort of at the top are willing to do and let their greed sort of take over. And that in a nutshell was, you looked at all these houses. They were just giving, what they're doing is they're trying to make something as low as possible so as many people buy. But the problem is that they're basically giving away houses. They're like, hey, we want your money, but we know you don't have a good job, so we'll take your money. We'll just amortize over longer, and we'll give you a higher interest value. And then instead of saying, hey, this is a high risk investment, they buried the risk, because the risk was still there. They didn't mitigate the risk. They buried the risk with good assets. And so the good assets were brought down, but the bad assets were made to look like they came way up. And really, there was more bad than good, but it was disguised as good. And then the one guy figured out that this is not a great situation to be in. So then he insured all his stuff against loss. And then when people started defaulting en masse on their mortgages, the whole thing fell apart. And then these guys got their money from the insurance and a bailout. So they got paid twice.
Well, I mean, there's another aspect as well, right? Is when you borrow from a bank, the bank actually borrows from someone else, another bank.
Yeah.
And so you got these cascading debts or loans, and then you default on the loan, and everybody panics right down the line, and it's kind of like a domino effect. So that's kind of what happened in 2008. And of course, the US is suffering from student debt issues. It's crazy that people are probably going to actually hit retirement and still be paying off their student debts. Is kind of what it sounds like. I don't know if that's true or if I'm just exaggerating there, but we're almost a lifelong debt. They're told that they have to have.
And here's the thing about it is that idea is that you don't have to pay your student loan while you're in school. Like, that right there should tell you, if you're entertaining the idea of a student loan, and they're telling you that we can give this to you and all you have to do is not pay for it until you graduate, that is like, that sets so many warning bells off in my head. I'm like, I'm not even gonna give you any money.
Yeah, well, it's not just that. I mean, yeah, that is a concern. But I mean, if the debt's, if the cost isn't ridiculous, then.
But then the problem is the cost is ridiculous.
Yeah, but
right.
If it's,
and then the question is that you're going to spend all this money, and then you're going to be in debt when you leave, and then there's no guarantee of employment afterwards.
Yeah, it's not the you'd obviously want to start paying your debts when you've got money coming in, so that's fine. I've got no issues with that. But yeah, it's just the absorbent price. There is nothing, no help, particularly for the US. I think we got some grants and stuff, and I don't remember college being that expensive for me, although I did get a partial scholarship. I think it wasn't much, but Yeah.
All my
So
post-secondary stuff I've always been able to afford, whether it's been
Yeah.
short-term loans or borrowing from parents or just working and saving and being able to do it that way. Um,
yeah.
my grandparents helped me out quite a bit as well. I mean, so I've always strategic. I mean, I've also paid for a lot. It's not. I don't want people thinking that, oh well, I had everything paid for. No, they pay for parts. They say like, okay, we can pay for this year, but you have to pay for your textbooks, or we'll pay for the semester, but you have to pay for the rest. Like it, it wasn't like I wasn't getting a free ride. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Um, or they say we'll pay for your cost up front if you pay us back.
Yeah.
Right. And so just to work out those kind of deals, and those are all just normal things that you would do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
not that big a deal here in Canada, but well, it's still an issue that people are still. I didn't go to work on my master's degree solely because we just didn't have the money. It wasn't financially viable. Otherwise, I may well be teaching sociology in the U of M by now if I could have done that. But
yeah, but the problem is they would have just been like, oh, he's been here for so long. I guess we could find him something.
Could be, yeah.
So
then I'd be Dr. Mark. I could go on Oprah Winfrey. Anyway.
There you go.
So the other thing too.
We have a couple other people who have joined us. A friend of mine from work, Ron Precisny. Welcome, Ron.
Hey, Ron.
And another good friend of a friend of mine's mom, Shirley Schroeder, has joined us. Hi, Shirley.
Hey, Shirley.
Hi, Shirley and Ron.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. Okay, so the other bubble, just actually for everyone that's just joining us there, we're kind of talking about the current financial situation, and there are several reasons why we're in this state. It's not just because of the virus, lots of other things. We're talking about financial bubbles, and we've gone down a list of several of them. And we're just going to start the next point here was government debts. Now, government debt in and of itself isn't really a problem if you have a central bank, if the bank is owned by the states or by the people, I should say, and then you're printing your own money. It's not a problem. But a lot of the government debts right around the world it's actually private banks that you're getting the money from. And as you're taking that debt on, now you're owing and taking interest from private banks and from private financial institutions. And then the more that you borrow, and if you raise your taxes a little bit, then the score your score goes up, making the interest rates go higher, and it's kind of a nightmare way of governments managing debt and more money. So that's one of the other areas, other bubbles there. And of course, the big one, which actually Richard Wolff's been harping on about for years, is the car loan debts. And you haven't gone past a car dealership that I'm sure hasn't had a 0% no loans refused or whatever. Right? So, and it's not just a matter of
also is that gets my skin crawling because as we're prepping for the show, I figured, hey, you know what, the car loan debt is interesting because I remember when I bought a car, I could finance through the dealership or I could go through a bank. And I looked at both options and the dealership was giving me like 3% less than what and this is going back a few years. When I seriously considered getting a car loan, it was 9%. This is going back probably 10 years. And the dealerships were offering something around 5.5 or 6. Like they were like a 3 or 3.5 percent points lower. I was like, well, obviously I want to go through them. But here's the thing is they weren't offering, you say it was 9% through the bank, but they wouldn't offer more than 3 years or maybe 4. And the dealership was like 1.5 points less or whatever it was, the differences, and they were like 60 months. I was like, that's 5 years. And now we just looked it up. Not only can you can get it for 7 years, you can get a loan on a car for 7 years. You can actually make it fixed or a variable rate, just like your mortgage. That's absurd.
Yeah. Well, considering that you're likely not having the car beyond when the 5 years is a stretch.
Yeah. Like, I couldn't believe it. A variable rate for 7 years?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, and that's all going down to the people trying to keep inflation down. So one of the ways you want to control the inflation, or the way they can, at least for a short term, is lowering interest rates, getting more money into the economy. So when you borrow, that actually kind of creates money, and the GDP goes up, and everyone's a little bit happier. But yeah, 0% is almost free money, you know.
Yeah.
And that's one of the problems. So I'm actually going to move on from the bubble, or the examples of bubbles. But so what's caused these bubbles? Well, many of them, particularly much of the loan issues, were caused by Bush's tax cuts that were made permanent by Barack Obama. There's the cheap money that I was just talking about, because the interest rates have been down so unnaturally low that the money has become super cheap, meaning corporate debt skyrockets. And of course, this all should have come to a head and been resolved and fixed in 2008, but it didn't. They just got another bailout. The bubble got in 2008. They got another a little bit bigger, and it didn't stop, and it keeps growing. So that's one of the causes. Another one is austerity and privatization. So I'm sure you've heard what austerity is, but effectively austerity in this sense is constraints on public spending, and it's public services have been demonized by the conservatives, whether it's conservatives with a small c or not. Democrats and Republicans as well seem to hate public spending. They're trying to avoid wherever possible. So cuts to public services, which will then lead, of course, then as a whole in the public services, and private companies move in, privatize those things so they can make a profit. So privatization and promoted profiteering and borrowing kind of take over.
Yeah. What always struck me as odd, and I've worked for big companies, little companies. What strikes me as odd is how, and especially because I've worked with government contracts, I was like, how much money a government could save by doing the stuff that they farm out if they did it internally.
Yep.
Like, it just absolutely is mind-blowing. Like, if we just looked at it from a purely dollar per hour, and if you look at it this way, even if you are paying a little bit less than what the open market, or what you could get on the open market. So I'll use it as an example because I work with a lot of electricians, and I work with a lot of guys who worked in new construction, which is like where they made just tons of money. It's not uncommon for a journeyman Red Seal electrician to be making like 75, 80 grand a year, even more if there's a lot of overtime opportunities, right? So if you're at, that's like $50 an hour basically. So they'll go and they'll work for they'll decide that they don't want to do new construction because that's hard on your body. You don't have much of a life. You're always at the job site. You're hauling heavy tools around, and time constraints and stress and stuff like that. So eventually you decide, okay, well, I just want to become a service electrician. I'm going to work for pick your government agency here. So then they pay them, instead of paying them at like that $45, $50 an hour, they're that $35 to $40 an hour. But they're Monday to Friday, they're 8 to 5. So if you want your guy to install a run of conduit and put in 3 lights, it's his wage plus the material that you'll get, and you'll probably get a deal because you're a government agency. Or you can have like 5 companies bid on it, and they're going to pay their guy $50 an hour plus whatever they're going to mark him up, plus they're going to buy the same conduit and pipe and wire and fixtures and lights that you're going to buy, and then they're going to mark it up. I don't understand how that austerity actually works. You haven't saved anything by being austere and cutting out that position.
No, not
it
all.
Makes zero sense.
Well, I've been in IT for 20 years, or at least I was until recently, and every time they try, whichever company I've been in, they farmed it out as help desk or so support for a particular product. It rarely lasts a year or two, and then it's like, this is costing us way too much money, and they bring it back in house. It never works to try and cut by farming out. Which I guess that's a different topic as well. That's one of the not different topics, sorry, different points. Moving production offshore, that kind of goes in with that as well.
Well, and I think we could probably do in a whole episode, probably a couple episodes on austerity and privatization.
Absolutely can. And I think if you look on the Two Guys Fixing the World YouTube channel, you'll see some I've done before Ryan joined the team, and we rebranded. I did a couple on that for sure. I did. So go check that out. My hair was a little longer, I think, or shorter. I didn't have the green screen then, I don't think. Well, I just started to use it.
No, I remember seeing a couple of those. I think you were just kind of sitting against the flat white wall in your basement.
Yeah. We have so move on to some of the other causes that are hurting us even now, especially now, is governments divesting in medicine and science. I say divesting or disinvesting, sorry.
I think your note says divesting in one and then disinvesting.
Yep, disinvesting is correct. So not investing in science. Well, they may mean the same thing, but I don't know. We'll find out. I'm sure someone will leave a comment.
Someone put out something in the comments. The difference between divesting and disinvesting.
So whichever one is more serious, that's the one I mean.
Whichever one is a real word.
Yes, whichever one's and if they both are the most serious one. So the idea is right. Medicine, because if you do turn away from science and medicine, then because those things get in the way of profits. Well, why would you do something that hurts people? And effectively, right? So like coal, oil, guns, chemicals, the environment, and so on are all affected negatively. And we're affected negatively by these things as well. So now we're actually stuck in a position where, we pick on the US, but we're probably not that far behind either. But where we're not really investing in the science and the research that we were. I mean, certainly before Stephen Harper's government, who did a lot of dismantling of a lot of the science and research departments, pretty much gutted that place. I don't think that anyone since has fixed that. I think we're just pretty much the same as we are.
No, and it really comes down to, and it doesn't matter what government you're in, governments don't like people telling them not to do things. And so it doesn't matter whether you're liberal or it doesn't matter if you're conservative, you have business interests that are going to contravene what research is saying.
Yep.
So whether it's coal or oil, or whether it's engineering firms, or whether it's airlines, or take your pick, they all have rich friends that they want to help. And it just really doesn't matter. They don't want anybody telling them to not do something that they want to do.
Yep.
So if their rich friend says, hey, I want to build this, they want to make that happen because they want to help their rich friend, then that's what happens. I mean, this whole oil pipeline thing that Trudeau's was like, hey, we're all about the environment. But then every environmental science is like, no, don't do it that way. He's like, no, we're going to keep doing it this way. Like, all right, whatever.
Because, and we're going to skip ahead in a minute, but we're going to get to that point that I'm going to make about that. We've talked about this before, so we can probably just skip over this one, the injection of money into the system, the quantitative easing.
It comes down to that socialism for the rich.
Yeah, we can talk. We can have an entire show about what socialism is, and it's not about the government giving you money. Anyhow,
Again, another full topic. We'll wet
It
your
is a
whistle
full
on that
topic.
one. Socialism for the
And-
rich. The same
and
people
it
that
does
tell
get
you
my-
that you shouldn't have a welfare state are the first to have their hands out when their business fails.
Now, if you want to say a welfare state for the rich, yes, but it's not.
Okay,
but
there
that's
you go.
not
Fair
socialism.
enough.
All right, well, we can
That's a
argue that
better.
one. We can argue
Yeah,
on
so
another show. Definitely, we definitely need to, but that's a little bit outside of the topic today. So
yeah,
injection of money into the
that's
system,
another show for
and
sure.
that just delays the inevitable, and probably, and I didn't actually get any source of this, but in my mind, that could even make the bubbles bigger. Certainly make it to the point. Certainly with the 2008 not being resolved, the problem's still there. Can only get worse.
Well, it just seems like they moved from one particular type of loan to another type of loan.
Yeah, actually,
hey, we were going to give anyone and everyone a house. We're going to give any and everyone an education, any and everyone a car.
Yeah.
But you're not going to be able to make good and get return on those on a good chunk of those things. So,
yeah. So
you haven't solved anything. You're just using it. You're just exploiting a different part of the system, right? So,
and so the other part of these bubbles as well is they're moving production offshore, which is what we were just talking about. Really, it's a matter of we have a problem. We need to make stuff, but much of production is offshore. We don't do it in Canada. We don't have much by way of manufacturing here. We dig stuff out of the ground or scoop it out of the ground and sell that on. Really, that's our main exports. And in the same regard, this is happening in France as well, and probably right across Europe, because they're like a single system is what they're building towards. But there was actually a quote I just want to from a French philosopher about France. So this was Macron, who is the, I want to say prime minister, premier, whatever. He is the equivalent of the prime minister in France. And this was a French philosopher, Michael Onfray, talking about Macron, who was at one point saying they have no masks. So this is what Michael Onfray says: there are no masks, so masks are useless. There are no tests, so tests are useless. But there are no masks because of France's incapacity as part of Europe. And there are no tests because France's incapacity is part of federal Europe, which itself claims to create a global state where the capital reigns supreme. So when there is a pandemic situation, liberalism can't rule because the old order comes back. Closed borders, sovereign states, and the head of states deciding to choose for themselves. I add that a little bit in. Police and military power. We go back to where we were before this, before the Second World War, really, right? Anyway, so that's kind of where we're just put ourselves in a position where we're globalizing. Everybody's all part of the system. And so when one little bit goes, we all suffer. And we can't look after ourselves. That's kind of the point there.
Yeah. It's, yeah. It becomes a point of like, and I guess the frustrating part for it is we're not the ones who put us there, right? Well, I guess in theory we are, because we built into this and we didn't stop ourselves from kind of walking into this trap. But I mean, in a broader sense, we're not really the ones to blame. We're kind of stuck in a system that is easily manipulated by people who have wealth, and easily you can very easily manipulate it and cause things to happen. So we just kind of have to, okay, well, the rich can do whatever they want, and I guess that's what it comes down to, right? So try not to be too negative here. I mean, we're already facing a global pandemic here. Stop being such a downer, Ryan.
Okay, and let's just pick things up a bit, just to lighten the load. Just want to say hi to Carrie Luce Forsyth, good friend of ours, and of course colleague of ours working on cannabiscastle.ca. Go check out. We got a new show coming out on Saturday. So hi Luce, how you doing? Thanks for joining us. Oh, actually, she does say, do we need to speak French for this? I say, okay.
Oh, sorry about that. Anyway. I got a couple of people who joined us. Julia Ratai is my wife's cousin. Hi, Julia. And an really old acquaintance and friend of mine, Tim Penner. Hi, Julia and Tim. Thanks for joining us. And hi, Luce. Glad you could join us.
Indeed. Okay, so we're talking about the bubbles and what causes them, but we have another point that we kind of need to make before we then move on of what is actually exasperating the financial crisis that we're having in now. It's actually 3 decades of neoliberal policies. So pretty much since the days of Margaret Thatcher, people just whenever they say, why did you move to Canada, and I always say Margaret Thatcher, life in the 1980s was awful, so by the time the 1980s ended, I had to get out of there. There was no future. And so with the neoliberal policies, really it's a neoconservative or even modern conservatism, there is the following things get seriously reduced, and I'll just list them off. So welfare states, healthcare, labor rights, and environmental protections. And we've kind of touched on all of these, I think, already this evening, but 3 decades of that, and seems to be getting worse in this last 10 years or so, at least from my point of view.
Well, and also, I mean, in that whole thing is it chips away at things like government oversight, right? If you think of in the early 2000s when the Enron scandal happened with them basically cranking up and selling power at ridiculous absorptive rates of like thousands of dollars per kilowatt hour, there was a government agency called FERC. I think it's Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. I think that's what. FERC. And they just basically sat and watched them do it. They're supposed to step in and say, "Hey, what are you doing? Why are you not doing this?" But that got chipped away. Funding got cut, and then all of a sudden there was this sort of vertical integration where it's like, "Hey, here's a guy we know is gonna not be he's gonna be at FERC, but he's not interested in actually regulating. He's actually just interested in making it so that we can regulate ourselves." Right? And another topic for that is, and that fits in with that austerity thing, where it's like, oh, well, we don't need government regulations because we can regulate ourselves.
Fingers crossed behind our backs.
Probably the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my entire life. Self-regulated, because the market will always balance itself out.
Yep.
No, it won't.
Yeah, yet finally the illicit drug trade, it didn't apply to them, right?
No. Hey, yeah. And I get even a better idea. Let's milk this from both sides. Let's build prisons for profit.
That's right.
And put people in jail who don't sell our products.
Indeed. Well, that's why you have a war on drugs, so you can fill up your prisons. Anyhow,
you have a war on drugs, but it never solved anything because you can't go to war against a noun.
So those were the contributing factors of where we're currently at, and of course the big thing that I really wanted to talk about, we kind of need to lay all that background down just so we can see how we got where we are, what's exasperating the current financial situation, and come up with what is it that we actually need to happen now, what do we need for now, and what do we need to make our future better so we can avoid this. Now, Justin Trudeau came out recently in the last few days and said that everybody that has been laid off because of the virus, and that's clear that you understand, because of the virus, not for any other reason, then you will get, or you can apply for $2,000 a month for every month for 4 months. I got ending in October, I think it is. Now, that sounds good. $2,000 sounds like a lot of money, but it's only $500 a week. I mean, you can barely make ends meet on that one. If you've got a family of 4 or a family of 3, even as I am right now, with my older 2 having lives of their own, that's not enough. We can't survive on that. And so if you've got 2 people that are out of work, you might get $1,000 a week. You know, when I was working full time, I was making 4 times that, so 3 times that, right?
Yeah.
And it was difficult then, just because of expenses and everything.
Yeah.
So we're going to need more than that. We are going to do a program or a show on UBI. We're definitely going to do that. We need to do a bit of research and I'm going to argue a little bit against it in that show. But what I will say now is we need UBI, and we need it now. We don't need $500 a week. It's pathetic. We need to be in a position where we can get through certainly these few months on whatever the government can provide us. I mean, it's our tax money for the most parts. You could argue it's loans that they're getting, but that's all going into the economy and making the economy move. But we need that now. Absolutely, we do. We need to bail the citizens out. So we, as human beings, please look after us, because we're the ones that are ultimately putting you in power and to look after us, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it really comes down to even on just forget your politics, put it aside. We're all human beings at the end of the day. We all have the same issues and same problems that we all have to face. And there's it's never as clear cut as we want it to be, but at the end of the day, there's people out there that need it. I'm fortunate enough that my wife is able to work from home, and I'm still considered an essential service. So I'm still working. So that hasn't slowed down for me. But there's other folks out there that are really hurting. They don't have a choice. They don't have a choice. Somebody made a decision. They were like, no, we're not keeping the office open. So now you go home. So, and whether they decided to lay you off or whether they decided to put you on leave, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
There's people out there. There's all sorts of things that are out there that we're trying to stem. I think that our governments, I mean, we've kind of been bashing them, but let's tip our hats. They've done the best that they could in the situation, and I just think there's things that they can always do more. Right.
Well, I mean, I think I mentioned this last week, because I think they're doing as well as they can with what they've got, but they've only got as little as they have, because they've only got themselves to blame. It's these consecutive neoliberal policies that have put us in this position where we are struggling. If we were being paid a fair amount, we could have some money put aside. But there's been a report out recently, both the US and Canada, you got 400 to 500, but that a Canadian family cannot afford a $400 or $500 emergency expense.
Yeah,
right. We should never be in this position. Never.
That's insanity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is crazy. So one of the things I've been very passionate about for a long time is the employment rates. The employment rate is calculated, and it's usually a lying number. It's people who are effectively claiming or actually on EI or are getting unemployment benefits. They're actively looking for work, and usually that number will come in. I forget what we had said. It was like about 4% unemployment, 4 to 5% in Manitoba, or at least around that anyway, average in Canada. But that 4 to 5%, whatever the number is, there's a lot more people who are actually unemployed, people that want to work but have given up or are no longer in the system. So we're probably looking at, when they say 4 or 5%, you're probably looking at 7 or 8% people are actually unemployed. What I would like to see is 100% employment, not a fixed 100% based on everybody that is eligible for EI is working, but everybody that wants to work and is able to work can work if they want to. So what I want is a guaranteed employment plan, a jobs program run by the people or by the local government, owned by us, run as a workers' cooperative, so that we can actually be guaranteed. If we're getting screwed over somewhere, we have somewhere to go. No, if we're getting hit by a draconian boss in some capitalist company that is just making us work 80 hours but only paying us 40 and can't then threaten us with firing us if we complain. We've got somewhere to go if we want to. We now will have a choice. That's what I would like to see anyway.
Yeah, and it's all good to have these things. So like I've had situations at work where I see it from both sides. It's like me as a worker, I end up, because I'm in a skilled trade. We have various safety concerns on job sites, right? And so we make it a point of understanding what the workers' rights are, right? And your chief four rights are: you have the right to know. So you have the right to know what you're going to do. You have the right to participate. You have the right to refuse unsafe work, and you have the right to do so without facing discrimination.
Mhm.
So nobody can say to you, "Hey, I'm shutting this job site down because this is unsafe," or "I'm not going to work here because it's safe until you fix what's wrong,"
Mhm.
right? And then I'll go and I'll do the job, because I'm not just trying to get out of it. I'm just, hey, I'm not. I want to go home. I don't want to get hurt. Well, I shut down a job site once because a crawl space, the air quality meter that I'm wearing, the piece of safety equipment went off. And it's like, it's not safe to be in here, so get out. Try and equalize it. Doesn't work. Low air can join in. Same thing. 10 minutes later, okay, we're not going to do any work in this crawl space. We're going to the next one. Well, this one's got carbon monoxide in it and low air. Well, no, we're not going in there.
Yeah.
Those could kill you, right? Low air could make you dizzy.
Yeah.
Carbon monoxide can kill you.
Okay, yeah.
So we just decided no. And then of course the sales rep who sold the job is mad. What are you talking about? You got safety concerns. You can't do that. Blah blah blah. I sure can.
Yeah.
I have the right, but it's like, it's protecting those rights. And unless you're going to enforce it, you can have everything written down on a piece of paper, but unless you can enforce it, it doesn't really mean anything. That's what it really comes down to. We need agencies. We need government agencies that are gonna actually do these things. It's not just about the employment. It's about all of us. We need things like that.
Yeah,
that's one.
It's all very well.
It, right?
It's all very well having those laws and having the rights to refuse it. But however, in Manitoba, if I go to my boss and say, "Hang on a minute, you didn't pay me for the overtime, all the overtime I did," and I complain, well, then next week they can just say, "You're no longer a fit for the team. Goodbye. And we're letting you go for business reasons, whatever. They don't even have a reason. Just here's your 2 weeks. Bye-bye."
Yep.
That's Manitoba law. So, and unless you can prove that was why they let you go because you complained, which is almost impossible, they may be able to come up quite easily with. They don't even have to defend it really for most of the time. Is that you're going to end up regardless, unless, like you said, unless we've got some way of enforcing this. There has to be real punishments for people that do that. And we've got. I'm not going to give any specifics, but I know someone who's lost some contract work because of this current situation. And the contract was written in such a way that he was expected to be paid for at least for 2 or 3 weeks. But he's scared that if he was to take to the court and say, "Pay me," that he may never get any work from that person again or that company again.
Yeah.
And that's kind of crazy that you can. The law's on your side, but it can screw you if you enact that. If you enact that law, so we need some strong punishments for the people in power, in those positions of power. That if they do that, then that's the punishment is so far to the extreme that they won't be able to refuse you the work, right? Because if they do that again, then they'll think about it. Hopefully, would think about it, but then we have the same issue. We need to be able to enforce it. If an employer lets you go, there has to be a good reason for it. And in the current situation, that it can take. Well, actually, in the current situation, anybody who's out of work for any reason other than the coronavirus, good luck. You're not going to get a job for maybe 6 months. It ain't going to happen. No one's hiring. No, you can't interview, and you can't go to your place of work. Right? Ain't going to happen. So the economy is struggling enough just with the people that have jobs, trying to get them working again, right? And so when they threaten to, and I can't remember if we said this on air because we've been on for about an hour now. I can't remember if we said this off air or not. Is that if the punishment, or not the punishment, was rather than just getting the 2 weeks severance, you're no longer a fit for the team. Business reasons, we're going to let you go. If we said, then you got to pay that person full year salary instead of 2 weeks. They'd think twice about it. If you really are not a fit for the team, great, pay the year's salary, bye-bye. It's no one's fault, but it shouldn't be the person with no power, who may well take another year, maybe even 2 years to find another job in the current environment. It's going to be even worse after this, right?
Or may end up having to retrain. So you think of yourself as an IT professional, and really what it comes down to is the world of IT is not going away. That's not a flash in the pan industry that just kind of cropped up overnight. That's not going away. But you may find that you have to retrain because they're not hiring someone who has 20 years experience. They want to hire the guy who has 5 years experience, who will take $10,000 less a year to have a job, instead of the $10,000 more to be able to actually live.
And that's where we need to take away that competition. I mean, the competition's fine to a degree, but when it comes to a point where you can actually screw people with it used to be in the 70s that you'd see it on sitcoms, I think, where someone would go and see their boss say, my wife's pregnant, can I get a pay raise? You were able to do that at one point. Think about doing that now. Like, no, you're going to get paid as a married man. Your wife's not working for whatever reason, and you've got 3 kids and 2 dogs and a mortgage. I'm going to pay you the same as a single guy that lives with his mum, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of an impossible position. I mean, but I think we're getting a little tiny bit off topic there. But
all just fodder for the next show, right?
It is. Yeah, we have lots for that. Now I think we need to do something about change our current economic system. Right now, we're here because our system is ridiculously fragile. I mentioned at the top of the show that Mark Blythe and Robert D. Wolf, 2 economists living in the US, have been predicting a massive crash in the economy years ago. They've been predicting this. It's going to happen. It's going to be massive. It's going to be huge. Didn't know what was going to cause it, or be the pinprick that popped the bubble. But it's been happening. We know this system is fragile. The legislation, actually, we'll just an example just to show you that our progressive conservative government knows this system is fragile, is because it's actually written into the minimum wage law, right? That minimum wages can be frozen if it looks like, or if we can forecast a recession in the future. That happens they know that's going to happen, and it's an excuse to not give the poor people, working poor, a pay raise in line with the cost of living. They know it, right? This is an example of that. They know that is true. So we need to change this. And it all comes down to the market, allowing the market to run the system is always going to fail. So any system that gives power to the market will fail. And it doesn't matter whether that's a capitalist system or a barter system. If we let the market run itself, we're doomed.
Mm-hmm. And that's why it was so absurd to me to get a thing like a variable rate car loan for 7 years. Like, okay, well, everything's low now because they want you to buy. What happens when things get really bad? That would have to be a brand
new car to even be worth your while.
Yeah.
Right? Imagine getting a Ibiza for 7 years. That's insane.
Well, and here's the thing that just doesn't make any sense to me is, if you're buying a property, you can do all kinds of things with that. You can get equity out of that. There's stuff that you can do. 7 years to pay off a car at a variable rate. Like, no.
Yeah, just
everything about that is just screaming, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. Well, but people will do it.
I know, and I'll give you a current example that we can all relate to on how bad the market is and how fragile the market is. Go to the shop right now and try and buy some toilet paper or some hand sanitizer or some disinfectant wipes. That's how good our system is. The marketplace is the worst place to distribute goods and services fairly. If you've got the money, or if you have the opportunity and you got there first, and you got the money, you can buy the place out. And if you just happen to be a bit late or don't have enough money or buy, the market is horribly unstable.
Which is one thing I do want to mention is like, and for all you people who, and I don't think it's anybody who's watching our show, but if you are sitting out there and you're hoarding toilet paper or hoarding hand sanitizer or hoarding all that, give your head a shake and go give some away. I'm just gonna break it down for you. I'm an essential I trades. I have a tool bag I carry with me everywhere. All it takes is someone not washing their hands properly, handing me my tool, and now my tool is contaminated. I'm contaminated, and I can pass on that virus to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And I might not get sick, but I've just passed it on. I need those wipes to do my job safely, not just for me and my family, but for you people out there. So don't hoard. It never helps. You have the social stigma of being a hoarder, right? Like nobody likes that because we all need it. And I don't want to say that if you're just stuck at home and you're in quarantine or you've been laid off, you don't deserve to have those things. You should have them. They're important too. But just think twice that if the maximum is 2 and you don't need 2, don't buy 2. Right? That's the whole thing I'm trying to drive home because there are other people need it.
Yeah, and the thing about the market as well is that the countries in which we live, the so-called capitalist countries, the Western world, if you will, they know capitalism is awful for distributing goods and services. Just look at any time there's a war. Who's the one that distributes it? Well, they take over. The government takes over the private companies, and they take over, tell them what they're going to produce. They take a planned. They turn into a bit more of a planned economy, and they ration out everything. Right?
Yep.
You can't trust these modern capitalist companies to do a good job in that regard at all. They're only good about very, very efficient with producing material, and they're very efficient about taking money from the lower echelons and giving it to a handful of people at the top. They're just a money funnel. Anyhow, again, that's another entire show we could do. But I just want to make another point as well. All this kind of comes together, I think, in realizing that when our countries, the US, Canada, Australia, UK, Europe, we have been fed this ridiculous idea that our countries should be run by business people. The best people to run governments. And it's kind of a ludicrous idea because what do businesses do? Businesses, like I just said, right? They are in place to extract money from the people and giving it to a handful of people at the top. And you want people to run government that way, but you hate taxes. So how are you going to do that? It's just diametrically opposites, right? Whereas government is supposed to be set up to provide services, and businesses are fundamentally set up to take money and to make money. They're not there to produce products and services. That's just a means to get the money, right? Yeah. And so the idea is that you pay the workers as little as you can. You got profits versus taxes is a hypocrisy. Profit is taxes that companies take, but you get nothing in return for it. At least with taxes, whether you like what the government's doing with it, you get something in return. We get roads at least, right? We get
roads.
Yeah,
you do get
hospitals.
You do get an army that will protect you from people who might actually hurt you.
Yeah, and we get some rather nice policemen as well.
Yeah,
I'm sure some of them are not nice, but I think all the ones I've met are. At least they've been to me anyway.
My experience with police officers of even when they're on the duty, I mean that's a tough job, man. Like you don't get to deal with the best of society when you're a cop. But the whole thing is most cops are just guys and women and men who just want to do the best they can for the community and go home alive at the end of their shift. That's really what it comes down to.
So we need to. So effectively, I guess we're kind of winding down here, but we need to run the country as if it all matters, as if all that matters are the people, the human beings in the country. And there's an old English saying, and I'm pretty sure there's a similar one, if not identical, in Canada. But if you look after the pennies, the pounds will take care of themselves. I'm going to put that on his head just a little bit. And I'm going to say, look after the workers and the businesses will take care of themselves. And I think that having listened to the whole show, that will kind of make sense. But yeah, if the workers are working well, if they're happy, if they're contented, if they're trained, if they're comfortable, what else do you have to look after when you're running a business?
Exactly.
Do you have any other? I've got a quote I want to read as we finish. Anything you want to add there, Ryan? Before I do,
just a very. It's gonna seem like a cheap shot, but I don't care anymore. We said we weren't just going to be a Trump bashing. I'm sorry. This story is just way too big. The U.S. has obviously elected Donald Trump as president, and he was a so-called quote unquote businessman, even though his business practices were very questionable. And they have now surpassed China in number of infections of COVID-19. So like a nation that's a fraction the size of the nation that it supposedly started in, or allegedly started in. I'm sure we'll figure out more details about it when the pandemic is actually finalized. Now wants to militarize our border. The border that has been between Canada and the U.S. has been demilitarized for, I'm going to say, at least 100 years. Wants to put up soldiers because he's afraid. This is what he said. He's afraid that people will come across the border illegally and spread COVID-19.
Right. We're not even leaving our houses, and I'm actually really hoping, and I'm not being a little tongue-in-cheek, I guess, but hopefully they're there to stop the Americans leaving.
Yeah, because right now you have more people who are sick and they need to stay in your country. So, to anybody who's listening to us in the States, stay inside, wash your hands, socially isolate yourself as best you can from people so you can't spread the disease, and vote that orange bugger out.
Well, don't go voting yet.
Not yet.
When it's safe. I just looked up the coronavirus cases in the US, 85,489. Yeah.
85,000 people.
Almost 1,300 deaths, and 1,800 people.
That's confirmed cases, right?
I'm not sure. It doesn't say, but I'm assuming it is. I just Googled. It's the first hit on Google.
Okay. So that would be 85,000 confirmed cases. And that basically happened over like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And like 2 weeks ago, they were saying, "Oh, it's just going to pass."
Yeah. Well, that's it could be a lot
we
more.
want to be open for business.
Well, it could be a lot more because they don't really have or haven't had tests, right? They haven't been doing thorough testing.
No, they haven't. So,
actually,
85,000 reported.
I just remembered. While we're talking about other countries and the ridiculousness, is that in the UK they've been told, just as we have, if you've got mild symptoms, stay at home. If it's chronic, then you need to be tested. And of course, Prince Charles, our wonderful German prince there in the UK, has he and his wife Camilla have both been tested, but they had very mild cases of the virus. Because then Twitter lit up in flames, and because there are people on the front lines in hospital that they're not allowed to be tested. So this is absolutely horrific. And they actually moved back to Scotland, Balmoral, and they're holed up in their stately home now. Anyhow, while we're bitching and complaining, there you go. So I just want to end this. Sorry.
Oh, and it was just like that other thing too, is we've been told, okay, we're going to prioritize people who are sick, and we're going to test people who are sick, which you should, and we're going to prioritize people who have been traveling, which you should. But the big scare about corona is you can be a carrier and not exhibit symptoms. So you should be testing everybody.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah. But we can't because the system isn't set up to produce anything useful.
Mm-hmm.
Anyhow.
Oh, and we just can't. We don't have there's not enough people to test I mean, I'm sure we could figure some way to, if there's enough will to do it, we'll find a way.
Yeah.
But we really need to be testing everyone, regardless of whether they're showing or not, showing symptoms.
Yeah. At some point, we may be in that position. Anyhow, so this is right on topic. I want to quote again French philosopher Michael Onfray, and this is from the same article. All of this will be available on YouTube and on our website as well, in the show notes. French philosopher Michael Onfray, the liberal ideology, or we've been calling it neoliberalism or neoconservatism. The liberal ideology, which was supposed to solve any issue, doesn't solve anything. This monster, which was supposedly going to make us able to compete with Russia, China, or the US, isn't even able to produce masks. It's failing because of its inability to produce masks for doctors. It is sending it to their deaths. There you go. Sober and somber comments there. Anyhow, well, thank you everybody for joining us today. It was a bit of a long show, so this will be available as well if you've missed any of it on your favorite podcast platform. We're probably going to split this into 2 episodes. I'll get that posted, and it'll probably be available in the next few days, at least the first episode. If you have any information you want to know about the show, you can go to www.fixingtheworld.ca right there. Okay. It's a little harder to do. There we are.
There we go.
Yeah, why do we do that? We always get it wrong. Anyhow. And you can contact us through the website there. There's a contact form, information, links to YouTube and Facebook as well. So thank you very much. It has been a pleasure doing this. It's a lot of fun. We're probably going to do this every week. Not sure what day yet. Wednesday or Thursday, I think, seems to work well. And
it'll be either one of those two. If you're wondering why the inconsistency, you can point the finger of blame at me. Like as I've mentioned a couple of times, I'm still working, and it's not always advantageous to be at home. Or I was actually traveling inside the province. I drove home from Brandon yesterday, and I wouldn't have had it in me to do the show. So,
okay. Well, thank you very much, everyone, and we'll catch you all again next time. The world has been fixed for another week. See you later.
He's gonna find you.